Rob, thank you very much for joining us here at the Rio Conventions TV studio today. You've just been telling me about business and how actually sustainability can be good for business. We hear a lot about how green growth can sometimes cost states and businesses more. So which side should we believe?
Yeah, you do hear a lot about that, and there is that general assumption that green means lots of money spent on big pieces of kit that reduce carbon emissions or whatever. But most of the analysis that we have done shows that green actually just means efficiency, and companies make major savings not just in energy usage but generally in the processes and the way that they do things. And there's lots of empirical evidence out there to show that companies just do better as a result of becoming sustainable, mainly because they internalize all the externalities of their business, reduce their risks, and understand much more about the impact of their business, and as such they're just much more competitive as a result.
PWC as a company seem to release a lot of these analyses on green growth and how it can improve companies' efficiencies. Do you think in a sense the whole message of green growth has been missold? We kind of think it's about planting trees and not, as you say, about energy efficiency and slightly more practical measures?
I think to some extent it has been. You know, most people, when you talk about sustainability or green growth, they immediately think about environment, when actually sustainability is much more about really just doing good business, focusing on that triple bottom line of environment, yes, fine, but also good business practice, but also the social element. You need all three really to have a sustainable and competitive business for the long term.
Okay, and your role is a technical advisor. Give me some technical advice on how a company can cut its emissions, cut its costs, and become more efficient.
I think the first step really is to look at your internal processes. It doesn't sound as technical as maybe you want, but really that's the basics of it, is have a good governance structure, so that sustainability is something special tacked on to the outside like a CSR program or something, but it's very much mainstream, so that everybody within the business just does it automatically.
And in terms of where you're based in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, it's an interesting part of the world where a lot of countries are, I guess, attempting to make themselves more efficient. They're also developing countries as well. What particular interests you about that region in terms of this debate?
Southeast Asia in particular is a real hotbed at the moment. Growth is in the 5, 6, 7%, in an area where most of the environment that we talk about generally is still there, it's still pristine. And so really is the forefront of what we class as the sort of sustainable development, and where the real needs and the impacts can be really made by helping companies and governments and NGOs to develop the sustainable paradigm that we need.
And in terms of this conference, you're here, so you clearly think it has some relevance. Plenty of businessmen yesterday said, we've really had enough of this. We don't see these global conferences actually working. We don't need the top-down leadership because business is already making steps. Do you think that whatever comes out of here, will that actually affect global business?
It was interesting actually, there was a question I just asked in the main hall just then. Businesses need to be confident that sustainability is going to work for them in the short term and in the long term. They understand the long term, but really they need to maintain competitive advantage today, or else they go out of business before the long term. So what they're really looking for is for governments to give them the confidence that the actions that they are taking that make them leaders are really going to pay off for them in the very short term, which means really for governments to be very clear about their intentions and to actually implement some of the stuff that's been talked about, particularly within the global development goals. And really stick to it and push and make that legislation such that those companies really do realize the benefits that we're all talking about.